All right, welcome to another episode of the Walking Off Podcast. This is Francisco. I'm joined by my two co-hosts, Todd and Wendy. How are you two doing?
Good, really good.
Perfect.
I'm doing great. I was questioned on whether Dairy Queen or Culver's had better cheese curds tonight. So naturally, I had to go try both. And then I also got some extra crispy French fries from Culver's on account of Ebo. So then it was white people taco night here at the house. So it was fantastic. I'm doing well, drinking lots of water because I've met my sodium intake for the next 6 months.
Awesome. Well, we have an exciting show lined up today. We have an awesome guest. We have Andy Herman, founder of Pack a Day Podcast. He also does some writing, Wisconsin sports fan in general. So we figured we'd have him come on, a local guy, get his takes on the Brewers and other Wisconsin sports in general, and just kind of pick his brain a little bit to see what he's done, how he's built his brand from what it is to now. So let's go ahead and bring him in, and we can. There we go. Andy, how are you doing today?
Hey guys, I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to talk some Brewers.
Absolutely. It's a good time to be a Brewer fan. First place.
There's never a bad time to be a Brewer fan. That's probably
good
not
answer.
True. That's probably not true, but I'm going to say it anyway.
Well, it isn't.
I think
it's a good time till the playoffs come. So,
right.
Yeah, as I was just looking ahead today to that September schedule for the Brewers, they've got 10 games against the Cardinals. Their last two series, they're on the road against the Cardinals and then at the Dodgers. They've also got the Mets just before that. The Cubs are in there. It's a rough September, October for them. So yeah, hopefully they're hot at that point in time going into the playoffs. But
you kind of need to be, right? I mean, no matter what, like if you're not hot going into the playoffs, it almost doesn't matter anyway. So I guess as good a time as any to get tested because, again, if you're not hot going into the playoffs, it doesn't matter all that much anyway.
Yeah, that's the point.
They say that the wild card teams sometimes have a better shot in the playoffs because they're oftentimes battling just to get into that last spot in the wild card. So and some teams maybe kind of let off the gas if they have a good division lead. I don't know if that's true in football. Andy, you probably would know more than I would. If I don't know how wild card teams normally do in football, but in baseball, like you can see that all the time with like the Royals in 14, the Giants I think in 12, even the Nationals in 19. They were all wild card teams who happened to get in and got hot and kept that momentum going.
Yeah, it goes in swings. So for a while, it didn't seem to matter at all. And then recently, before last season, it was like the number 1 and 2 seeds were advancing into the NFC and AFC championships pretty regularly. And then last year, of course, Tampa wins it as not a wild card team, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So. So they had to face Washington in the first round as a wild card, and Washington is the division winner. So, I mean, you never know, but I think it's the same as baseball, right? I think that's what makes sports so enjoyable is you can't script the stories ahead of time. Every time you think you've got it figured out, where it's like, all right, the bye matters, and or the teams that are have it all wrapped up, like they're gonna breeze through the playoffs. Doesn't work that way, right? And then all of a sudden it flips switches and you can never keep track of it, which again makes sports that much more fun.
Here's a question for you. Speaking of playoffs, what do you think is the best sport in terms of playoffs to watch?
That's a really great question. So I know nothing about hockey. I don't know any of the players. I know nothing, right? I know the rules generally. I know like the top, I could maybe name like 3 or 4 players. But man, overtime playoff hockey, like Game 7, anything like that is as must-watch television because it's just that one goal feeling and like your whole season's over and like the guys get on like their last legs and you can just tell like it just kind of it's just that sudden death. And I think anytime the closer you get to sudden death, the better. And I think that's what makes, overtime playoff hockey so great. But again, I barely watch hockey. So I think that's in the running. I think, any single elimination is great, which is what makes football great, which is what makes March Madness so great. All those are in the running. And then I've more found myself, growing up, I'll be totally honest. Like I hated baseball until I was about like 21. Like I could not stand. And then the Corey Hart, Ricky Weeks, Prince Fielder, like that team, I'm like, all right, let me check this out. And then I got kind of hooked from there on out. But the feeling of a Brewer, probably my favorite playoff game of all time of anything, was the Niger Morgan hit to win the game and go on to the, next series. Like that, again, sudden death, right? Game 5, extra innings. So it's so amazing. But like that team was so amazing to watch. And then I don't know, like that, like in baseball, when you get to the point where literally like every pitch you're at the edge of your seat, because baseball is such a slow burn. Like basketball is fast paced and all these other sports can be so fast paced, but baseball is such a slow burn that a lot of times for me personally in the regular season, that can kind of work against it. But man, when you are in a playoff do or die situation, when you are living and breathing on every single pitch, it's right up there as well. That was a really long answer to not answer.
No, that was the perfect answer for that one. So you mentioned, you didn't really get into baseball, until early 20s there, and what got you in that. What we always like to ask people that come on, what got them into baseball. But for you, I guess, what got you into sports?
I was born in Green Bay, so that doesn't, that I don't really have a choice in that regards. But actually, the really interesting thing is that my family, my parents and my sister, that for the most part, they could completely give or take sports. They could completely give or take the Packers. Like, so I grew up with a family that like I was sports obsessed from the moment I touched eyes on sports, except for, again, baseball, which I couldn't get into until later in life. But I remember like Hawks basketball used to be on TBS. Like that was like the main basketball you could get. And then of course, like your nationally televised games and whatnot, but like there could be a Hawks game on a Thursday night against some complete jobber team. And I was watching it like it was the Super Bowl when I'm like 7 years old. Same thing. Every Packers snap, like to me was do or die. And even like it could be preseason against the Patriots and it didn't matter. Like I needed to live and breathe every single one of those snaps. So, it's just something that it hit me immediately. It's something that I was drawn to immediately. I don't even know that I can necessarily explain why. It just happened.
That's awesome. I feel like, a lot of times when something like that hits you, there doesn't necessarily have to be an explanation. It's more of like a feeling. And I think that's what sports are for a lot of people.
And I think the craziest thing to me is that, like, let's step aside, right? Let's say that you could grow up obviously you could grow up anywhere in the world and you could have any sort of sports team around you, right? If you could pick a team from scratch in any sport in all of the world, like I would be hard pressed for almost anyone not to put the Green Bay Packers in like the top 10 of franchises that, like, if you were just happened to be like randomly picked for what franchise you could choose growing up, like the Packers have to be in that top 10 list. They're just the tradition, the small city, like all of it. It's so insanely unique. So the fact that I was so drawn to sports from the moment I set eyes on it, before I even knew that Lambeau Field was in my backyard, and then to realize that I was lucky enough to not only live within biking distance of Lambeau Field, but also somehow with a family that doesn't like sports has season tickets to the Packers. Like it's out of a stupid fairy tale that, nobody would read, but it shouldn't happen that way. And somehow it just did, which makes it all that more special.
That's funny because for me, my family was the opposite. We were all baseball fans. We had season tickets. I didn't start watching football until I was maybe 13 and I grew up in Oakland. So that was the year that they went to the Super Bowl. And I'm thinking, I got a team that's going to be legit for years to come. This is going to be the team that I'm cheering for. Little did I know that I wouldn't see another playoff win or playoff appearance, not even win, playoff appearance until I was maybe 26 or 27 years old. So I went 15, 16 years without seeing barely a winning record. So I was pretty much the opposite of your experience there, Andy, because I picked a team that I thought would be good, and they pretty much tricked me.
Yeah, I mean, how insane is it that, I'm 9 years old and I'm at the game where Mikowski gets hurt and Favre comes in and throws the touchdown to Kittrick Taylor. And like 9 years old is kind of, I feel like when you start comprehending to like 7 and 8, you're like, all right, these are sports and certain things happen and whatever. Like, I feel like 9 is right around the time where you kind of start at least comprehending it a little bit more and understanding it. That's kind of like my real true, like, born again or born as a sports fan moment where Brett Favre comes in, throws a touchdown. It's in my end zone that I'm sitting in. My dad holds me up over his head so I can see Kittrick Taylor grab this game-winning touchdown from Brett Favre. And then ever since then, I've seen a handful of Scott Tolzien and Seneca Wallace starts. But other than that, 2+ decades of Aaron Rodgers or is it 3+ now? I don't even know, of Brett Favre and Aaron Rodgers, which is just stupid dumb how lucky that is.
Yeah, his Brett's first start was the day after my 7th birthday. So I didn't understand what was happening. I remember the Mikowski game only because like my dad and my uncles were freaking out that some guy just came in and ripped that throw and they won. And I was like, that's like my first football memory. Wasn't so much that happening, but then I knew the next week I was like, I'm going to watch this again. This is a thing I'm going to start watching now.
By the way, if you thought like my takes started when like I started podcasting stuff, my hot take when I was 8 years old was that there was no way that Brett Favre should be the backup. It needed to be Ty Detmer. And when Mikowski got hurt and Ty Detmer didn't come in, I was crushed that this Brett Favre guy was coming in and not Ty Detmer because I had huge hot takes on Ty Detmer when I was 8 years old. So I feel like I can be forgiven a little bit for my lack of scouting knowledge at age 8, but it's definitely my first of many poor takes to come for the remainder of my life.
You
gotta start them young.
Yes.
Yeah. Luckily, we're not held to most of the things we say and do when we're 8.
Fair enough.
So you kind of mentioned podcasting and the other things that you're doing here with the Packers. What kind of started that for you, and how did you go about just building? I feel like Andy Herman's a brand in Wisconsin sports. How did that kind of come about for you?
Yeah, that still seems weird even to hear, to be honest. So the first time that I noticed that something was semi-different, that I could maybe not even do anything in sports, but maybe that I understood it, like literally when I was 8, 9, 10 years old, sitting in the stands at Lambeau Field, I was the only one in my section that understood all the playoff scenarios, that understood all the penalties, that understood all of the play, like not the play call, but like understood the game better than all of these mostly drunk, 25, 30, 35, 40 plus people that were sitting around me. And they would literally be asking me the nuances of the game when I was 8 or 9 years old. And I was explaining, certain things to them as I grew up, it became more and more. Now, when I graduated college, I graduated with a history degree from UW Oshkosh. I didn't really put much time, effort, and energy into high school or college, to be totally honest. I just wanted to get a degree in whatever. I thought that was it. My idea of life is that like whatever degree you get at that time, my idea of life, whatever degree you get, that's what you're going to do, or you just have to kind of work your way up the ladder somehow, somewhere. And luckily I've been able to do that in my real career, but never in a million years did I think there was any avenue for me to have any sort of sports, anything, because if you don't have a journalism degree, you don't have, you haven't played, sports at any sort of high level, like how do you even remotely start getting your foot in the door? And then basically what I started doing, I started my own, and some people may recognize this handle. I started my own blog, which was scanisports.com. And I was, writing a daily, I was writing like 5-6 articles a day at times. Like, honestly, I was probably working harder then than I am now. But like my best friend and like one other person maybe read it. And finally, I'm just like, well, this doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Like, why am I putting that much time, effort, and energy into something that nobody's reading? And then Titletown Sound Off, like somebody posted something on Twitter, and I finally signed up for a Twitter, posted, here and there, just kind of like a casual fan, whatever. Somebody posted something about, wanting a blogger for, to write about the Packers for Titletown Sound Off. This is, I don't even know. This is maybe 10 years ago. And so I'm like, okay, I'll put my name in for this and let them know about the Scotty Sports and some of the articles I did and things like that. And they were cool with it. So I started writing for Titletown Sound Off and maybe got like 1,000 followers on Twitter along the way from doing that. Luckily, the one thing that I did, which was insanely smart, but was not planned to be smart, it was just dumb happenstance more than anything, is there was a game. I don't know if you guys remember this game, Aaron Rodgers versus the Kansas City Chiefs, where he threw like 6 touchdown passes in the game. He was 5 or 6 and was just on fire, like barely threw any incompletions. And Pro Football Focus after the game gave him like a really bad grade. Because he had like a perfect passer rating, like 6 touchdowns, no picks. And it looked like he was on fire. And one of the things I did when I was, sorry, this is super long and boring, I apologize.
But
No, was excellent.
When I was writing for Scotty Sports is I actually did a Pro Football Focus grading style system for all the players on all the plays. So I reached out to Jersey Al at Cheesehead TV and I said, hey, this is a huge topic. I'm like, let me go through and regrade Aaron Rodgers games like I would grade it and see if Pro Football Focus was just dumb or if they were actually onto something. So I put that art in. Jersey, I was like, yeah, great. You can be a guest contributor one time and, write this article. And I wrote it and it, got good reviews and whatever. I don't even remember what the, ultimate argument ended up being or whatever, but I did that. And then I ultimately kind of left Titletown Sound Off, took maybe a year or more off from really doing much of anything. And then this is literally, so 4 years ago, almost to a T, because it was right when my second son was born that I reached out to Jersey Al that summer 4 years ago. And I said, hey, I would like to, do something again, writing about the Packers. He had, posted something on Twitter that said, hey, we're looking for writers. And 4 years ago, almost no Twitter followers, certainly no podcast, no TV, no radio, barely any writing. I signed up to write for Cheesehead TV. And that one article that I did for them, they're like, oh yeah, we remember you. You wrote this article. It was good. Yeah. Well, why don't you do something? And I kind of decided at that time, if I was going to do it, I was going to do it big. I wasn't just going to do like, hey, I'll write an article once every month and that'll be cool. Like I wanted to do something big. So that's when I started doing the huge film reviews and the grading the pack series where I graded the players on every single play. And then because I had all of that viewership and watched every player and every play, it gave me an insight that almost nobody else had from doing something like that. So all of a sudden, radio stations reached out and then TV stations. I started doing the Green Bay Nation with Lily Zhao and Marcus Eversole, and then started my own podcast, which I reached out to people to see who was interested, expecting to get like 2 or 3 people, and like 200 people responded, and we narrowed it down and now have this amazing Pack-A-Day team. But the insane, again, boring, long story short, is a lot of it came out of nowhere.
Interesting. That's awesome. I mean, I'm not, like I said, I'm not a Packer fan, but I watch your videos because I find the insight that you give, I find it interesting. And I'm not a football guy in general. I guess it probably comes from having a team that just sucks every year, where it's it's hard to really dive into. But I do appreciate, the work that you put in and, where it is now. So it's awesome.
I appreciate that a lot.
For sure.
Yeah, I think your story is especially inspiring for a lot of these up and coming sports journalists. And I think it's fascinating too, just the power of connection and networking that even Twitter has. I mean, that's kind of how I was able to find these guys. But just the persistency that you had and like being willing to put in the work to do things that people weren't necessarily doing before or seeing that could be done. I think, that's what's going to put you on the map. And I mean, it's so cool for me to kind of see, where you started and where you are now. So you should be definitely very proud.
Well, I appreciate that greatly. And I mean, you hit the nail on the head. Without Twitter, there's nothing. There's no Andy Herman. There's no Andy Herman NFL. There's no Pack-A-Day podcast. There's none of it, period. And obviously getting to make some of those connections on Twitter was huge. For example, with the radio show that I do every week now for almost 3 years with Marcus Eversole, where I go on, usually just about 15 minutes a week. But I reached out to him one day and said, hey, if ever you have a dead spot where you need to fill some air and you need somebody to talk Packers, I'd be happy to be on. And I reached out to maybe 30 people before that, never heard anything back, right? But Marcus is like, you know what? I've been thinking of putting something together, of doing like a weekly film room where we go into the, dive into the tape a little bit more, go into a little bit more minutia, maybe like a 10, 15-minute spot. He's like, let me get back to you on something, in a few weeks, which I thought was, all right, never going to hear back from this again. And he, responded back a few days later and said, yeah, let's do this. Let's start doing it every Friday. And, we've changed the dates and stuff from time to time, but, we've been doing it almost every single week for almost 3 years now. And that was due to networking with him and reaching out to him. Lily's out, Green Bay Nation. So the same exact thing. I reached out to her and said, hey, if ever you need somebody to come on and talk about something Packers related, you just don't have anything else going on, I would be happy to come on and chat for a few minutes about something Packers. And same thing. She's like, all right, yeah, if ever I need something, I'll let you know. Never expected to hear back. And then she said, hey, I would like you to have you on. What we're going to do is, her and Marcus, we're going to do like every week. And then they were going to have a rotating guest spot on every week. And they wanted me to be the first guest. And I came on and apparently I did well enough. And they're like, all right, now we want you to do home games. And the next week was a home game. So I came back for the second week and I did that one. And they said, we want you to do this all year. And I'm like, okay. So that's how that got started. All because I reached out and put in. The only other time I was on a camera before that point in time, I was like in the mall and they're like, hey, can we ask you questions? And they put a microphone in front of my face and I froze like a dumb idiot and had no idea how to talk or say anything. So now all of a sudden I'm cameras everywhere, TV on me. And I'm expecting her to like coach me through some things on how to go through this. And I'm just kind of sitting there waiting. And all of a sudden I'm like 3, 2, 1. And then she does her intro. I'm like, here we go. Like, I know what I'm doing. Same thing with podcasting. I didn't even own like a microphone. I'd never hosted a podcast before. I think I'd been on maybe 2 of them, but here I'm starting a podcast. Like, it's some of the times you just have to jump into this stuff and see what sinks, see what, swims, and kind of go from there.
Yeah, that's incredible. And I feel like that is a lot of how I got started with this through Game On Wisconsin. Was they had asked me if I wanted to do some writing, which I really think was just because Jason Perrone was tired of me sending him long text messages that he had to read, and was like, you just start writing. And in that, I was like, I want to do a podcast. And like, great. Have you ever done one? I was like, no, not at all. And I feel like a lot of people through quarantine, everyone's got a podcast these days. And so, it's just like, get the equipment and start going. So Andy Herman, the pioneer of that for Wisconsin sports.
I don't think that's true, but I will. There's definitely ones that came before me for sure. But no, I mean, that's the crazy thing is, again, when I started the podcast, I didn't even want to do a podcast. I'm like, it was like the furthest thing I was already busy enough doing everything else, but I'm like, I feel like I have to do this. And it's crazy because more often than not, I think you guys did the same thing today. People don't introduce me as, writer for Packer Report more often than not. They don't, introduce me as, on Green Bay Nation. They introduce me as owner of the Pack-A-Day podcast. Almost every radio show that I'm on, almost every TV show that I'm on, that's what they introduce me at. Like, that's the thing, which is crazy to me because I would have never expected that. I would have expected all the other things would have been, I'm on a TV show, or I'm on a, writing for a, where I'm credentialed as a writer for Packer Report. Like, those would be the things, but no, it's always owner of the Pack-A-Day podcast, which is great. I love it, but it's such a huge thing to have under, a feather to have in your cap, which I didn't even expect, to be honest.
Yeah, it's incredible. And honestly, I usually forget that you do all that other stuff too. Mostly because my schedule during the season bounces around between Dan and Jimmy's availability when they have Pack-A-Day responsibilities. So we work through that for you. So
appreciate that.
Absolutely. Well, Andy, it was a pleasure having you on. Any parting thoughts that you have, or you want to let people know where else they can find you or what else you got coming out?
Yeah, I don't know when this is airing, but I'm going to be at the Bucks game on Friday, so I'm super excited about that. We need to get a win, obviously, so that's obviously a big Wisconsin sports topic right now. Appreciate you guys having me on. This is awesome. We'll definitely have to, do it again and actually talk some more Brewers and not just my boring story at some point, because a first place, Brewers team is, much more important and compelling than however the heck I got here. But appreciate you guys having me on. It was really, really fun.
Absolutely. Yeah, we definitely need to have you come back on, especially since this team, like you said, they're first place. It's always good to be a Brewers fan, until it's not, I guess. But yeah, we'll definitely have to have you come on, talk some baseball with us. And yeah, whenever you're available, just let us know. We love that.
I appreciate it, guys. Oh, yeah.
Real quick, speaking of the Bucks, do you think their minority owner, Aaron Rodgers, shows up to any home games?
I do not. I think it would be a distraction for, even for the Bucks. Like, they would probably get asked about it. I think that's the last thing he would probably want at this point, would be to be because if he shows up at a Bucks game, the story is no longer about whatever happened in the Bucks game. It's about Aaron Rodgers immediately. So I don't think he would do that, to be honest.
Last night would have been a great game for him to show up to then, so that we didn't have to talk about their performance.
It would have been a great game. It would have been a very good. You know what the thing is, though? I always expected there to be a hangover from that Nets series. That Nets series was one of the most heavyweight fight basketball games that I've seen since like the Pistons and Bulls and Knicks of like the 90s and the Pacers. Like those were, beat 'em down brawls back in the day. It's been a long time since it's been like that. And this wasn't like insane in the physical, like where there's like a bunch of fist fights and stuff like that. But it was a physical series where not only that, but like towards the end of the season or end of the series, last 3 games, especially, like everyone's logging like 40 minutes in the game. Like they were just dead. So I always, if they could have stole a game, not stole, they had home court, but when they had the lead, if they could have closed it out, I would have felt really great about the series. But I was not surprised by a loss in game 1 at all. And just them running out of gas at the end. And I think now the question is, can they had 3 days, I think at least 3 days rest prior to that last game. Now it's every other night. Now can they get their legs back under them and, win this series? I think they're the better team. We'll find out, I guess. But I always expected that game 1 to be troublesome because of that last series with the Nets.
Yeah.
That's fair.
Good point. Awesome, Andy. Well, hey, we appreciate you coming on, man. And you have a good night.
All right. Go Brewers, go Bucks, go Packers. I'll talk to you guys soon.
Absolutely.
Right,
Thanks, Andy.
All right. When that